In a towering glass building where silence often spoke louder than words, there ruled a man everyone feared, Adrian Voss, the millionaire CEO known not just for his success, but for his cold, ruthless demeanor. Employees avoided eye contact, conversations died when he passed, and even the most confident managers shrank under his sharp gaze. His presence alone was enough to tighten the air, like a storm waiting to break. To him, people were replaceable, emotions were weakness, and kindness was a distraction he couldn't afford. The office ran like a machine, efficient, precise, and utterly devoid of warmth. No one dared to challenge him, because those who had tried in the past had quietly disappeared from the company, their desks cleared overnight like they had never existed. Then one ordinary morning, something changed. A new face appeared behind the office cafe counter, a small space tucked into the corner of the building where employees grabbed their coffee in hurried silence. Her name was Ilara. She wasn't like the others. There was a calm strength in her eyes, a quiet confidence that didn't bow to the tension surrounding her. While others whispered and rushed, she moved with purpose, greeting people with a soft smile that felt strangely out of place in such a cold environment. Most employees barely noticed her at first, they were too busy surviving their daily routine under Adrian's rule. But fate has a way of placing the right people in the right moments, and that moment was coming. Adrian entered the cafe that day like he always did, sharp footsteps, rigid posture, and a look that demanded obedience without a single word. The room fell silent instantly. Employees lowered their eyes, pretending to be busy. The previous cashier had always trembled while serving him, often making mistakes that earned harsh, humiliating remarks. But today was different. Ilara stood behind the counter, unaware, or perhaps unbothered, by the storm approaching her. Coffee. Black. No sugar. And make it fast, Adrian said coldly, barely glancing at her. Ilara met his gaze for a brief second, not defiantly, but not submissively either. Good morning, she replied calmly, her voice steady and clear. It was such a simple phrase, yet it echoed in the silent room like something revolutionary. Adrian paused. No one greeted him like that. Not here. Not ever. Just do your job, he snapped. Ilara didn't flinch. She prepared the coffee carefully, without rushing, without fear. Every movement was precise, almost deliberate, as if she refused to let his impatience control her rhythm. When she handed him the cup, their eyes met again. That will be $5, she said politely. Adrian frowned. You don't know who I am. I know you're a customer, she replied, her tone respectful but firm. And here, everyone pays. A quiet gasp rippled through the room. This was unheard of. No one had ever spoken to Adrian like this and remained standing. For a moment, it seemed like the entire world had frozen. Adrian's jaw tightened, his eyes darkened, but there was something else there too. Something unfamiliar. Not anger. Not exactly. It was confusion, maybe even curiosity. You're new, he said slowly. Yes, Ilara replied. And I intend to do my job properly. There was no arrogance in her voice, only conviction. And that was what unsettled him the most. Instead of exploding, Adrian reached into his pocket, pulled out a bill, and placed it on the counter. But as he turned to leave, he stopped. What's your name? He asked, without looking back. Ilara. He nodded slightly and walked away, leaving behind a room full of stunned employees who could hardly believe what they had just witnessed. That day, something shifted in the office. It was subtle at first, whispers in the hallways, glances of disbelief, but the seed had been planted. For the first time, someone had stood up to Adrian Voss, and survived. But the real change began in the days that followed. Adrian found himself returning to the cafe more often than necessary. At first, he told himself it was just for convenience. But deep down, he knew it was something else. Every time he approached the counter, Ilara greeted him the same way, calm, composed, unafraid. She didn't try to impress him. She didn't avoid him. She treated him like a human being, not a monster. And strangely, that unsettled him more than any confrontation ever could. One afternoon, after a particularly harsh meeting where he had reduced a senior manager to silence, Adrian walked into the cafe, his mood darker than usual. Coffee, he said, his tone sharper than before. Ilara looked at him for a moment. Rough day, she asked gently. The question caught him off guard. No one asked him that. No one cared enough to. That's none of your concern, he replied. Maybe not, she said, preparing his drink. But sometimes people don't need solutions. Just someone who sees they're human. Her words lingered in the air long after she handed him the coffee. For the first time in years, Adrian didn't have a response. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, something began to change, not just in Adrian, but in the entire office. Employees noticed that his tone softened, just slightly. The tension in meetings eased. The fear, while still present, wasn't suffocating anymore. And it all traced back to one simple moment, a cashier who refused to be intimidated. Ilara never tried to change him. She never lectured him or challenged him aggressively. She simply treated him with dignity, and expected the same in return. And somehow, that was enough. Because sometimes, the strongest act of courage isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it's quiet. Steady. Unshaken. It's standing your ground when the world expects you to bow. And that's exactly what Ilara did.